Cover a few things about how heat moves. Heat can travel. Heat can travel. You got your three main ways heat can travel. First way, and the easiest way for people to think about is conduction. Conduction. It's direct contact. Molecule touching molecule. So direct contact, molecule touching a molecule. Remember when we passed that piece of metal around in the room and everybody touched it? If I touch this metal, is there going to be heat transfer?
Yes.
What's happening?
The cooler metal is taking the heat from your hand.
That's right. The warmer heat from my hand is traveling to the cooler, less heated metal. Heat seeks cold. The heat from my hand is going to the cold metal, or the cooler metal. So there's heat transfer. I'm touching it though. There's direct contact. You also have heat transfer from your body on direct contact. When you walk outside, your warmer body is touching the cooler air. Air is a thing. And as the cooler air is touching your body, there's going to be heat transfer to that cooler air. When you sit on a big fluffy couch, those big soft, like, oh, this is soft, it just kind of swallows you up. Like at first it feels really good, but after you're sitting there for a while, what does it start to feel like? It starts feeling hot. Your body heat has transferred to that cooler material by direct contact. Now that it's heated that couch up, is there going to be heat transfer? The temperature is the same, there's not going to be heat transfer. So it starts to insulate you, and then your temperature goes up.
Yeah, I'm warming the seat up for you.
Warming the seat up, that's right. Exactly. When you go to the bathroom and you sit down in the toilet and it's cool, that's a good thing. That means there's conduction, there's a big temperature change. But when you go to sit in the toilet and it doesn't feel cool, you don't feel that heat transfer. That means somebody else has already warmed it up for you, and you never want to think about that, right? But it's conduction, direct touching. If I have a metal pot and I heat the pot up with fire, and let's have one here. Show it. Let's move at least a few of the flammable things over. Your side empty. Right, so
blow shit up as a kid.
I plead the fifth. I think it's the fifth. That's right. That's good. All right, so if I put a little bit of water in here, I turn this on. This going to the metal pot. Direct contact, right? Now where's the heat from the pot going? To the water by direct contact, right? So what are we doing to the water? Heating it up. Direct contact. The heat is directly going into it because it's touching each other. Okay? Pretty simple, right? If I take this metal, and now that it's warmer and you touch it, is there going to be heat transfer? Direct contact. That is conduction. It conducts heat. If you have a metal box, and you go sit inside that metal box, you're going to feel a lot of conduction. If you touch that metal, there's a lot of conduction. Heat moves fast through metal, especially such as copper. So there's conduction, direct contact. That's usually the easiest one to remember. The next one. Good. Convection. This is the movement of heat through a fluid. Not necessarily fluid, a liquid, but a fluid. Movement of heat through a fluid. Through a fluid. That's a good question. So liquid, right? Is liquid flowing in this pot? So that's fluid motion, right? And see it moving around? Because the pot's a little bit dirty. There's a little bit, oh, it's tea though too. So it's fluid, it's flowing, it's fluid. But, let's see, what else is fluid? Let's try. Is there anything flowing? Right? So yes, air can be a fluid because it's flowing. Gases can be considered a fluid because it's flowing. So fluid doesn't have to be a liquid. It can also be a gas. Right? So when they have aerodynamics, they hook them up with a wind chamber, they put cars in there and they see how it's moving. It has liquid-like properties. And air can actually stick. It'll actually stick to the component of the car, which some things actually call drag, but it's because of fluid. They actually have a thing called fluid dynamics. It's the movement of fluids. But air is a fluid. And water is a fluid. They work very similar to each other. Okay? So we can have movement of heat through fluid because of, though, this is what gets tricky, because of density. The movement of heat through a fluid, and air can be a fluid, and because of density. Okay? Density. So now we got to kind of go into density a little bit. All right, so I put some water in here. Before I put water in here, what was in here? Air. Yes! Everybody always gets that wrong. Usually people say nothing. You got it right. You know what? That deserves a high five. High five. Yes. There was air in here. And it just so happens that air has a very low density. The water that I put in here has higher density. So that means if something is more dense than something else, it is heavier. If something is less dense than something else, it's lighter. So when I put the water in here, the H2O in here, it was more dense than the air. So what happened to the air? It got pushed up. Perfect wording. It got pushed up. The fluid pushed to the bottom and pushed the air up. And the more water I put in here, the more it's going to push the air up, right? Because the water is more dense or denser. Correct? Mm-hmm. Now what would happen if I pour all this out? I should probably do this as an example. It would be a good example. All right, so what's in here right now? Air, good. All right, and what happens if I take some oil and I put oil into this pot? Where's the oil going? Down. What's it doing to the air? The oil is pushing the air up. Good. That's exactly what's happening. Which is more dense? The oil. Which is less dense? The air. Good. So now if I take and put in liquid.
You mean water.
Liquid water, yes. Put in water. Good. You're right. Thank you. If I put in water, where does the water go?
Bottom.
To the bottom. What did the water do to the oil? Push it up. Which is more dense? The water. Which is less dense? The oil. Now what did the oil do to the air? Pushed it up. Now compared to the air, which is more dense? The oil. Which is less dense? The air. See how that works? Density. Yes, sir.
That's how they make those 2 liters, like with the layers and all that, right? In
Oh,
school,
like cocktails and stuff like that.
Can you make a
Layer it.
B52?
I haven't seen that. Bring one of those in. I don't know.
Well, like
Like
Lemonade is
layer
less Bailey, you know?
Oh, okay.
You layer
Drinks
less
then.
dense alcohol with the denser alcohol,
hard to
and you
do.
can layer drinks to have like.
No
a
kidding. I have to
You
see
just gotta do it
that.
really carefully with like a
Very
spoon.
carefully.
And
So that'll be a great. I wonder if I could use that as a tax write-off. I could go and mix these drinks to teach density, and then
dispose of them properly at the end.
you have to. It would be alcohol abuse if you just destroyed it. You have to. Yeah. I'm gonna ask that. Great. I like the way you think. That's good. So it's density. It's moving. Those different things are moving. But let's think about now only one component. So we've compared different things, which is pretty easy just for us to think about. But let's think about if we had that same pot, right? And I put in here a little bit, well, just filled it up with H2O, with water. And at the very bottom of this pot, I put the heat, right? So we had the fire going right here at the very bottom. Is the heat from the fire going into the pot?
Yeah.
Yes. Good. What kind of heat transfer is that? It's this conducting heat. Now the pot is conducting heat to the water, right? So what part of the water is getting warm?
The bottom.
The bottom. So as it becomes warm, what happens, those molecules have more heat energy. So they're moving faster, yes. Now they're moving faster. Now they're moving faster. They need a little bit more room. Imagine, you get some people out. It's a club, everybody's like, yeah, they're dancing, right? Okay, we're good. And then you get some energy going, right? And the energy's good. You start moving more. You got more energy going. You're moving faster. You need more what? You need more space, right? You need more space. So you gotta get everybody to spread out a little bit more. You gotta have more space. Then you get that break dancer in there, and he's just like spinning around and all that crazy stuff. He needs a lot more space. He has a lot more energy. Everybody else backs up, lets him out of that room. He needs more space. So this is what's happening to the water in the bottom of that pot. It is heating up. It's pushing out. Now, in the same amount of area, you have fewer molecules because they're pushing away from each other. So what does that do to the density of that water? It becomes less dense. So when you heat water up, water becomes less dense. So this water at the bottom is now warmer, aka less dense. So the water at the top is cooler, more dense. So the more dense water is going to start to push down. As the cooler water pushes down, that is going to push up the less dense, lighter water. And you start to have movement of fluid. Movement of fluid. How cool is that? So, and then if you really think about it, when you have water boiling, where do the bubbles start from? The bottom. Okay, so if I get water hot enough, it's changing state from a liquid to a vapor. The vapor is less dense, right? That vapor is being pushed up by the water, the heavier water coming down. So that water vapor, it's traveling up. Those bubbles hit here, turns immediately to a vapor, and that heavier water pushes down, pushes that less dense vapor up and out of the pot.
So would a hot air balloon be conduction or
Ooh,
convection?
we're going to get there. We're going to get, yes. I love the hot air balloon example. It's perfect. So as I have water or any fluid at all, and I heat that fluid, is there going to be motion in that water? That heat will be moving around, and that is convection. That is without a doubt convection. And you can see it happening in a pot. You can put a little bit of salt in it, you can see it. You turn it on, you start seeing that water flow. There's some food coloring, drop some drops of food coloring, and you start seeing that motion move around. It's the heat moving. And a water heater, again, notice I call it a water heater, not a hot water heater. If it was already hot, you wouldn't need to heat it. But a water heater, if you have an electric water heater, where's your primary element? Bottom. At the bottom, yes. That's exactly right. So they put the heating element here at the bottom because as you heat that water, the cooler water will come down here, right? It's heavier. And the less dense, warmer water will travel up and start filling up from the top down. Now you have two pipes in a water heater. They are specifically labeled for this reason, and I've seen people hook them up backwards before and complain that their water heater didn't have enough warm water for them. But you have an incoming pipe in. That pipe travels all the way down to the bottom. Right? So the reason is that cooler water starts coming in. We want that cooler water to come in the bottom near that heater and start heating up. And then the out pipe is just connected up here at the top. So the warmer water, because of density, is going to naturally be up here at the top. Now, if I didn't have this pipe coming down to the bottom, the cool water would mix with the warm water and immediately have a temperature change. As I open the valve, the cool water would come in and straight out. So by having this piped down to the bottom, that cooler water comes in next to the heat element and is, because of density and convection, is making sure that I keep the hot water coming out at the top. Now, some of the newer ones, they have an additional heater here so that as you start running out or using up all of your hot water capacity or your water capacity, what they do is shut this element off and just start heating this one. So they're trying to heat the water just before it comes out of that top section. But this is the one that, and if your element goes out, it's always this one that goes out first, because that's the one doing most of the work. And it's also the one where all your sediment collects to as well. And a gas water heater, the flames at the bottom again, same thing, and you have the same thing with the pipes. The inlet water pipe, the outlet, and if you mix those pipes up, you lose all the capacity from your water heater. Right? Pretty cool, huh? But it's because of density, water density. And we can move that fluid, it'll move just by adding heat to it. They have a little example. I'm going to make one. They got some tubes that are bent, and you heat on one side, and you can see the fluid moving through the tubes because of density. As you heat water, it expands, and that expansion means it's less dense, and the cooler, heavier water is going to move it, or fluid, whatever fluid it is. Now let's talk about air. As I heat air, what do you think happens to the density of air? It gets less dense because the molecules now have more energy, they're moving faster, they need more space to make those move happen. So as you're sitting here right now, your body is giving off heat to the air, first off by conduction. Your body is touching the air, there's conduction. But now that your body touches the air, what's happening to the temperature of the air around your warmer body? It starts to go up. You're putting heat energy into the air around you. Now the air around you is heating up, so it's moving faster. And it spreads out. What happens to the density of the air?
Goes down.
Density drops. So the air becomes now lighter, right? So as that air becomes lighter, the heavier, cooler air pushes down, the warmer air around you starts to travel up. And there is a movement of air around you just because of convection. And that air starts to move because of convection. So your body gives off heat by conduction, but it also by convection, because as you warm it up, if I heat this pot up, it's conduction, the pot, and the pot is heating the air by conduction. But now this pot is also giving off air to the heat, giving off heat to the air, by conduction. But now that this air is warm, the air becomes less dense. So that less dense air, if I put my hand here, I can feel warmth above it. Why can I feel warmth above it? Because the less dense air, the warmer air, is now rising up because the cooler air is pushing down. So that's convection. The air is moving. You're feeling it. You guys may have heard this many times in your life, but you probably heard it misworded. And most people think of this as hot air rises or heat rises. It's not that heat rises. It's that warmer air is less dense, so therefore it's lighter than the cooler air, and the cooler air is pushing the less dense air up. Okay? So it's not that heat rises, heat seeks cool, and I can prove that by, it's a little bit warm, but what I can do is I can have somebody hold this pot at the bottom, and I can put the fire in right here above it, and if heat rose, then your hand would never get warm. But you know without a doubt that that's not true, because your hand will get warm even at the bottom.
So on a cold day, your breath doesn't go down.
Cold? We can't have a cold
On
day.
a cool day, your breath doesn't go down. You didn't see me,
Sorry.
I did the quotation.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. So what we do is we have it say, okay, well, heat rises, because we always know that, and I'm going to heat this up from the top. Because heat rises, it's never going to get hot in my hand, right? Oh. So wait a minute. Heat didn't rise, did it? It went down. It went down the rod. But what's happening is the air, the warmer air, the heated air rises because it's less dense. And air is a fluid, so that movement of fluid happens because of convection. So warmer air rises, warmer fluid rises. Right? You see it? Yes, sir.
What they say in case of fire, stay low.
Stay low, yes?
Yeah, because of the smoke is ice.
Because smoke is going to be a byproduct of fire, and one of the byproducts of fire, you're going to have heat, right? But also smoke, so the smoke is also going to be warm. So it's going to be warmer. The cooler air is pushing that less dense smoke up. Yes, good. Now you're thinking. So down on the floor, yes, that's exactly right. Good. Excellent. And same thing with the fireplace. Right? You got a fireplace, you got the smoke's a byproduct. That smoke going out the chimney, the cooler air is actually pushing that less dense air up. Because if you cool the smoke off, you may have seen it with your car, if you cool the smoke off, it will drop back down. And on a car, you see on a cool day, sometimes the exhaust will come out and start going up. As it cools off, it'll then go back down and hang low because of density. Right? So it's not that smoke always goes up, it's because of smoke being less dense. It's being pushed up by the cooler air, right? Never thought of this way before, did you? But it's very important. It's everything that we do, how heat moves. It is a part of what we work with. So now let's go to your hot air balloon. That's a very warm rod. It's a hot rod. All right, so first off, they have the balloon, and they hook a fan up to it, and they just try to pump as much air in there as they possibly can first. Big fans. Everybody loves a hot air balloon, but they got their own big fans. Anyways, so they try to get as much air pumped in there as they can, and then what they do is this balloon, they start having these big propane burners, and they start putting these big burners in here, and it's awesome. Yep, and so that happens, we're putting heat energy from that into the air, and these the molecules in the air start to move faster. As they start moving faster, they push away from each other. You have expansion right there, it's pushing away from each other, and so the air inside is lighter. There's less molecules of air because they're spread out inside this balloon. So there's less molecules of air inside this balloon, and the molecules of air inside this balloon are lighter than the air molecules outside the balloon. So the air molecules over here, they're more dense, and yes, it is pushing the balloon up. If you notice the shape of the balloon, it's pushing the balloon up. The cooler, more dense air is actually pushing up.
It's creating lift.
It's pushing up the less dense air inside, and it's creating lift. And so as you heat this balloon up, the density changes. Because the density changes, the balloon moves up, and the movement of that balloon is convection. You had a question?
So on like a really hot day, that would affect it?
Yes, that's where I was going next. Absolutely right. So if it's already a hot day outside, what's happening to the density of air around it?
Less dense.
Less dense as the air outside warms up. Now it's more difficult to get this balloon even hotter to make even a bigger density change happen. So that's why you hardly ever see these hot air balloons traveling on a warm day. That's why they're almost always in the morning. Well, for two reasons in the morning. One is because there's less wind in the morning. But a big reason is because of density. In the morning, the air is cooler, and so therefore the density is high in the air, so that doesn't take as much work for them to heat up this air to make this air less dense to get the movement going on. Right on. It's all because of density. So it's not that it's not that heat rises, it's that warmer air rises due to the movement of the heat of air through a fluid and because of density. Somebody else had a question?
How does humidity affect the hot air balloon?
Ooh, I've never thought about the humidity factor in it. That's a good question.
Probably be some air conditioning has BTUs and stuff.
Well, okay,
the reason
so-
I ask that is because you see them out here, you don't see them in Florida or Minnesota.
That's a good point. And the answer is on that one because humid air is less dense than dry air. What?
Yeah.
So you're thinking of water compared to liquid water compared to air, and you think well, water is always going to be in the bottom. So you automatically think that water is heavier. But you got to go into the molecular structure. What makes up air as we know it? Nitrogen, right? Which I can't remember exactly what nitrogen. I think it's N2 or N3 or N1. Maybe it's N1. I can't remember what nitrogen. I think maybe it's N2. I can't remember. I think maybe it's N1. I don't know. There's so many nitrogen molecules. The air that we breathe is also made of not just nitrogen but oxygen, right? And oxygen is O2. So there's actually two oxygen molecules that are combined together. And nitrogen, I can't remember. I can't remember what nitrogen is. But Here's an example of an oxygen molecule. There are two oxygen. Here's oxygen, but what we breathe, what we call oxygen, is really two oxygen molecules combined. If you add a third oxygen molecule, then that becomes ozone, which will actually attack your lungs and your soft tissues and break down organic compounds. But so we want ozone is good up high, bad nearby. But oxygen is what we breathe. There's actually two oxygen molecules together. So if you go down to the molecular structure of that, and then you add in
Nitrogen is N7.
H2O in 7?
Atomic number is 7.
7. So there you go, 7. So if you look up oxygen, H2O, it's H hydrogen, 2 oxygen. So the hydrogen atom of water is less than the weight of nitrogen. Hydrogen versus nitrogen. Hydrogen is actually lighter than the nitrogen. So H2O, water vapor, compared to nitrogen vapor, oxygen is lighter. So to have more humidity in the air means there's more water vapor in the air. More water vapor means there has to be less other stuff in the air. And then so when you have more water in the air, it makes the air actually lighter. So desert conditions, the air will be heavier because of the actual weight of nitrogen. Now, assuming you could do this, you can't, but if you took liquid nitrogen and you took liquid H2O, liquid nitrogen would be on the bottom and the H2O would be on top of it because of the weights. Now, we know we can't do that because one would turn into a solid and you know that would change stuff, but that's what would be happening. So according to your answer, then yes, the desert would be a better place to fly a hot air balloon because of... And Florida is also a bad place for hot air balloon because, you get over the ocean and...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard for them to catch up to. But they do it. But anyways, that's one.
The periodic table is N2.
N2 for
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen?
Yeah. So that
Okay.
makes sense because the atomic number is 7.
So the weight's 7, but it has 2 molecules in it.
There you go.
So it's nitrogen's N2 because there's 2 molecules, but the weight of nitrogen is 7. What's the weight of hydrogen? The atomic weight of nitrogen. It goes down to humid air is lighter than dry air.
I keep thinking you're saying
Hydrogen
air.
is 1.
Humid air,
Yeah.
humid air, humid air.
Atomic number of hydrogen is 1.
1. So see, nitrogen's 7 times heavier than hydrogen. And water, H2O, has hydrogen. So yeah, makes sense? Good. All right, so the simplest way we could word this is convection. It's a movement of heat through fluid because of density. And what I want you to know is less dense is lighter. Less dense, lighter, and more dense, heavier. So less dense, lighter would be warmer things, or of the same substance, something warmer versus that same substance, something being cooler. And I also want you to add a little note here that warm air, water or fluid otherwise, rises. So if you have a 2-story house and heat's coming into that house, where is the warmer, as the air warms up, where's that warmer air going to go? It's going to go up to the 2nd story. And it's not because heat rises, it's because warm air rises.
So that's why I always yell at my roommate for cranking up the heater because they're freezing downstairs and I'm sweating upstairs.
Yep,
Okay, it makes a lot of sense.
that's right. The best solution for that is to have 1 unit for upstairs and another unit for downstairs, or
Space heater?
but it's still, even if they're heating downstairs, that heat's going to travel up. Zone control, air zone control ducting, but 2 units, 1 unit for upstairs, 1 unit for downstairs. And even the best thing would be if you had them isolated, like with the doorway.
Or a lock
It
on
never
the
happens.
thermostat.
Well, look at the thermostat's good. Maybe you can also offset the thermostat too. Change it where if it's digital, you can go into the programming and change it to where it shows a warmer number than what it really is. And in the summertime, you can do the opposite. You can show it as a cooler. Yep. So convection, the movement of heat through a fluid, and air is a fluid, so same concept. And then we have conduction, convection, and radiation. Radiation. This is the movement of heat through waves. So parades have a lot of heat because there's a lot of people. Wait, no? Okay.
Beauty contest.
It's radiation, the movement of heat through waves. And this is really cool. This one's a little bit more complicated, but heat travels through a space. Heat travels through a space. Aha. Without heating that space. So heat travels through a space without heating the space until it strikes an object. Heat travels through a space without heating the space until it strikes an object.
Like sun and the earth.
Like the sun and the earth. Heat travels through space. It doesn't heat the space. It travels through our atmosphere, and it doesn't actually transfer heat until it strikes an object. So when you're outside, you're feeling that heat hit against you. It's striking you. You're the object. It's putting heat directly into you. The building, whatever it's touching. But if I have these blinds open, heat is traveling through this glass, and heat strikes the floor and the table and everything in here. So heat strikes these objects. That's radiant heat. Now as the heat strikes the objects start giving off heat to the objects it's touching and the air it's touching by conduction. Now as the air that it's touching heats up, that air starts to move by convection. So even though that radiant heat's not heating a space till it strikes it, it's coming in here, it's heating up all this carpet, the tables, everything in here, which is then heating everything it's touching by convection. The air is being heated up by conduction. The air is heating up by conduction, but the air is now moving by convection and transferring that heat throughout this room, all because of the radiant heat hitting an object. That then turns into conduction, which then turns into convection, and you have a lot of heat movement. So what's beautiful, though, is if we have something in a controlled area that heat can strike and be contained in this one area, we have less heat infiltration. And an even better thing is because it travels in waves, I could design a substance, a film that I could put on top of this glass that when these waves came through, the waves would hit on the outside of the glass. And the heat could be contained, a good deal of that heat could be contained outside the glass and actually ever come in.
So window tint.
Window tint! Brilliant! You should invent that. Oh, wait a minute. It's already been done. But that's what window tint is. It captures those waves and causes the heat to be collected outside the window so it doesn't ever come in. I read that more people get skin cancer on this arm and this side of their face
Driving in the car.
in America because they're driving the car. They got the heat's coming through. So that window tint's a big, now more and more new cars have window tint automatically, but it helps prevent a lot of that from happening, that infiltration from outside. So these windows have argon-filled glass. That's to prevent conduction, heat transfer. But they have that window film, the shading on it is to help prevent radiation. And then we have these blinds on here. That radiation's attacking the blinds in one area, and it's controlled. Less of an infiltration.
Window tint here in Nevada is kind of legal. If you're driving in California or something, they'll make you strip it off. But in Nevada, because it's so damn hot, they're like, yeah, you can have it.
Yeah. So also you have many other things like this. For example, you go to a gas station and they have their food that's several days old, possibly, not all of them, and they want to keep that food warm without eating up the whole entire store. They can put a lamp on it that makes radiant heat waves, and that strikes the objects and keeps the objects warm. But let's think about if I had a big commercial building, and let's say we're doing auto repair. So we had these guys working on these parts, or this guy's doing this or whatever, and you had this huge open airspace, and it's going to cost a fortune to heat all this airspace. Plus, you had bays where trucks are coming in and out. It's not efficient to heat that whole entire space and all those objects. But if I had a radiant heater, and I put radiant heat waves, and those waves were shining on you and on what you were working with, it would keep the object you're working with warmer, and it would keep you warmer without actually having to heat the whole entire area. How does that sound?
Like a radiator.
Radiant heaters. Radiators are a little different. Radiators are doing heating mainly by convection, mainly.
So like this restaurant I go to for brunch, they have a big radiant heater on their balcony, and that works way better than their space heaters or whatever, the ones with the flame,
Yes.
because I can actually feel it.
There's still a flame,
Blown
usually.
away.
They'll put a flame through a tube,
Oh, okay,
but they convert that to radiant heat, and they shine those waves on you. So that way outside, I mean, I love to eat outside, but I don't like it when there's a lack of BTUs in the air. I don't like the heat transfer leaving my body. I prefer to have warmer, higher BTU levels. And so when I go to those restaurants, it's great because I can sit outside, have the fresh air, all the stuff I like about being outside, and still have the radiant heat warming me. It's impossible for them to heat that whole entire air, but they can heat me and keep me comfortable. And also a lot of the casinos do the same thing. People standing outside waiting for taxis. I don't want to wait in the less heated environment. So they have those big tubes of the fire. And the fire looks cool, but it's contained in a safe place, but it's radiant. You're feeling the radiant heat from the fire. So a lot of this, if you put your hand above this, put your hand above this, what do you feel? Feel the convection? A little bit. All right, now put your hand beside it. Feel warm? That's radiant. So above it is heating the air, and the air is rising, and there's some radiant also. But when you put your hand beside it and under it, so you can still feel the heat, that's because of radiant heat. It's those waves you're feeling. So your body actually cools by conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. But these are the three main ways heat can travel.
That look of fear in his eye was great when you came at him with the blowtorch. So sure.
Well, that's much.
All right, and so conduction, convection, radiation, and there's a little song that goes with this as well.
Oh. Getting ready for American Idol?
Let's see. This computer is not the fastest computer. There we go. I'll click this one. There it is. Found it. It used to be easy to find, but now I've put so much music on here.
You gonna dance with this one too?
You probably don't want me to.
There are three ways that he could travel, but it could travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses the radiation, conduction, and convection. There are three ways that he could travel, but it could travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses the radiation, conduction, and convection. First things first, Let's discuss heat, what it is before you pay for it to warm your feet. Heat is the energy that flows when atoms and molecules move. It diffuses out towards coolness. Temperature is the measurement of the average motion of these atoms and molecules in the atmosphere. So there you have it. Now the first way of transportation of heat energy is radiation, like sound waves from your radio stations filling the empty space around you. Your radiator warms you, but don't start a fire now, I warned you. Heat is going through radiation from the sun before it burns you. From 93 million miles away to re-radiate this heat is what the earth does for you. This is the Bible, what this heat is going through before it rises to the sky and it's gone. So there are 3 ways that heat can travel. But it can travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses in radiation, conduction, and convection. There are 3 ways that heat can travel. But it can travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses in radiation, conduction, and convection. Conduction, the second method on my list. You can feel it like a hot pot in your fist with the handle gripped. I bet you'd rather grab a candle lit, cause it's heat through conduction that causes this. Atoms and matter in a fixed position vibrate when heated like a pan in the kitchen. Transmit the heat energy to atoms next to them that are cooler than they are to cause equilibrium. To even out the temperature, the heat has to travel up the spoon in your tea in the morning with your bagel. It might burn your hand, but just learn the land of conduction, heat energy until you understand. The earth gains little from conduction. It's mostly radiation that helps us function and keeps us warm. It's just another way for heat to move. But now let's move on to method 3 to prove. There are 3 ways that heat can travel. But it can travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses in radiation, conduction, and convection. There are 3 ways that heat can travel. But it can travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses in radiation, conduction, and convection. Convection is the movement of heat in liquids and gases to even out the temperature fastest. This process is called diffusion. It's a flow of particles cold and hot in a fluid. If you're not listening, then stop what you're doing, cause this is the final mode that heat can move in. And this affects you every day. It's the breeze at your back and the wind at your face. When heat reaches the earth, it rises at a rate with the air in the place, and it moves up till it cools. Trillions of molecules together make up the weather that we see on the news. It's how they measure the pressure of the air and the
Rhythm,
temperature.
rhyme,
Perfection is
results.
how it got there in the
Conduction,
atmosphere.
radiation,
So
conduction,
don't be
convection.
scared. Heat moves in 3 ways, so we make things clear. It's like there are 3 ways that heat can travel. But it can travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses in radiation, conduction, and convection. There are 3 ways that heat can travel. But it can travel in any direction. From the sun it moves to the earth quick as a shadow and disperses in radiation, conduction, and convection.
So you roll up on a service call playing that?
Good, yeah. I need some 12s though. That's Radiation, Conduction, Convection by the artist is Rhythm, Rhyme, Results. So need help memorizing which one's what. That's what placement of that. But we got one more thing to still talk about. Add to this. So conduction, direct contact, convection through fluid, heat moving through fluid, and radiation through waves. But convection, we can split this off into one more. We have natural convection, which when we talk about convection, that's usually what we're talking about, natural convection. Naturally happens. But there's also, we can make forced convection. Forced convection. I can force convection to happen. Do you know that? Look at this. If I have heat and I'm forcing the movements of that heat through air, I'm forcing it to happen, this is forced convection. I'm a big fan of this method. It blows. Forced convection. So forced convection is the force movement of heat through, if we use air or gas, it would be with a fan. And if it's, can I force a fluid to move?
Yeah.
We can force a fluid to move typically with a type of fluid pump. So we can force it to move with a type of fan or a pump. We can make heat travel. We can force, and that's called forced convection, natural convection, and forced convection. We force it to happen. Questions? Those are the three main ways heat can travel. Conduction, convection, radiation, convection split to natural and forced. Yes,
I
sir.
just thought of an example there. This is really important in building a structure. In our hometown, they built a hockey arena.
Okay.
And they put in-floor heat underneath the seats.
Okay.
To keep the fans warm.
Okay.
Melted the ice. They couldn't use it.
Wow. How about that?
In every other ice arena that were ever in, and my kids played hockey, you had the radiant heat.
Right?
That's
Yep.
the only way you could do it.
Yep. Yep.
Otherwise, you'd melt the ice.
Somebody overlooked something very important. Yeah.
But it just all
Interesting.
makes sense to that now.
Yeah, it all ties together, yeah. Absolutely right. So, on that same point, let's talk about up north, a lot of places like in what he's talking about as well. Here, what do we use most of the time? Air conditioner, heating. AC, right? It's hot here most of the time. Like, a few days out of the year we use the heater. But now let's think of if we're in some place like Maine, where the temperatures, we're using more air conditioning, more heating. More heating. We need a lot more heating. So what they'll do is they will use their heat and floors. We call that radiant. They call it radiant heating, but really it's not. What we do is they take pipes. We have a water heater that we heat water. We have a circulating pumps. We have forced convection, and we force the movement of heat through a fluid. And we take those pipes, run those pipes back and forth through the floor, and then we'll pour concrete over those pipes. Or sometimes we'll take the pipes and hook them to the bottom of wood floors even. The other way, we take the fluid. It doesn't have to be water. It can be glycol or something that has a very low freezing point. But by putting warm water through those pipes, removing that water is forced convection. Now, what is the water doing, the heat of the water doing to the pipes? Heating the pipes. Now, what is the pipes doing to the concrete? Heating it. Right? Now, what is the concrete doing to the air that it's touching? Heating it. Right? Now that once the air starts to warm up, what's then happening there? Convection, right? So they heat the floor. They call it radiant flooring, but it's a horrible name for it because really it's fluid convection and conduction and then air natural convection again. But that's how they heat a lot of the houses up north. They need it all the time, and it works great. I can keep this room a nice steady temperature. And what's really nice is you take your feet off, your shoes off. You can't take your feet off; that'd be painful. But you can take your shoes off. You walk across the floor, and it's nice and warm. It's really nice and warm. It's really a great way to maintain the temperature of the rooms. It's not a great way for quickly heating it, but you had a nice constant maintain of heat. It's a great, very comfortable way. You don't need air ducts. It's pretty efficient way of heating. But here we just need to heat every once in a while. We want to heat up quickly. That doesn't work so well for us here. It's a big expense. So when I was working in Miami, there was a penthouse down there. And this guy had this, which is like a hotel, some big building down on the South Beach. And in the penthouse means he had the whole top floor. And he made that his home. And he had plenty of money. And he had these tiles brought in from South America, these huge tiles, a special type of marble or something they were made of. But the guy, what he didn't like was when he took his shoes off. He liked to be barefoot. When he would take his shoes off, he didn't like the feeling of being cold. He didn't like the second law of thermodynamics, the heat leaving his warmer foot into that cooler tile. He didn't like that. He wanted the tile to be nice and warm. So what they did was they installed what they called radiant heating in the floor. So they ran the water pipes back and forth into the floor, so they kept the tile nice and warm all the time, so that when he took his shoes off and put them on that tile floor, it felt warm to him. It was more comfortable for him. But what is that doing to the air? Heating it. Yes, it's heating the air. Absolutely. So the air is now warmer. Well, what do you want in Miami? You want warm air in Miami?
No.
Yeah, not so much. No. So we had to have a larger size air conditioning system in there because we had to not only cool the air from the heat coming in from outside, but all that heat that we put into the floor that heated up the air, we had to take the heat from that air and take that heat out also. Ideally, we would like to take the heat out of the air and put some of the heat right back into the floor. It would be a more efficient way, but I don't think they did that way then. I can't remember. But these are some of the things that you have. The guy says, look, I want the tile to be warm. Usually you'll see this happen in something like just the bathroom, because most people wear sandals or something throughout the house, even if they have inside shoes, outside shoes. But in the bathroom's a place where people want to, they'll be coming out of the shower and they put their bare feet on, and they don't like that feeling, so they'll have heaters in it. They make electric ones and they make water ones. I'm all for the water ones. I'm not a big fan of the electric ones. Electric wires running in the floor in the bathroom where you have a lot of water, I don't think that's a great idea, but it's my opinion. If it's passed UL inspection and all the other safety protocols, then I can't say it's not a viable option. I'm just saying I don't like the thought of my feet and have a wet shower being near electrical components like that.
Survival of the fittest.
It's true.
It'll weed out the idiots.
Well, so any questions about conduction, convection, radiation? All right, good.